Hey, welcome to Next Level Method Podcast. I'm Richard Ryerson.
And I'm Matt Lilly.
And we're here to help you take your life to the next level. Let's get started. Marianne Williamson is on the show today. Well, what'd you think?
I love her. I love her energy. I love her tenacity. I love that she cares and is passionate about things in the world, and I really do. I respect her. I respect that she's been doing this for so long. I didn't realize how long she'd kind of been around the political system.
Yeah.
But certainly, I just, she's got. I don't necessarily agree with all of her political views, but I certainly can. I certainly applaud her for her passion for change and wanting to do something about stuff. I think we need, in my opinion, we need more people in the world that are passionate enough to actually take up, have an opinion and say, you know what, I care about this, and I'm going to put my energy behind it and try to make it different, try to make it better.
Yeah,
right?
and I agree with you. I certainly don't agree with a lot of her policy beliefs. I love her tremendously on how she, uses love as kind of a centering piece for everything that she does. That's what I found her, how I found her in the first place. Yeah, so it was nice though to see, as we talked on here, I think she is somebody I would like to sit at the table with and argue with.
Right, yeah.
And she would still respect you. And I think that's what's been lost in a lot of these things. And so that's kind of my takeaway. How does it apply here at Next Level Method? I think, again, when you're kind of pursuing
your purpose, right?
Your purpose, it can get messy. It can get, it demands a tremendous amount of authenticity, but also demands a lot of respect and love, particularly for those that you're around. I guess when I was thinking, and this might be a weird place to take it, but I was thinking when we were having this conversation with her, that much like when we had that live event that you,
we did. Yeah.
And, when you pursue your purpose, it can be, I think in the beginning, when I said in my presentation to stay stupid, it's fun to be excited. And then when you start doing the work, it starts like, okay, this is really messy
work,
and grinding and work.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to have conversations with those that are closest to you. They're going to disagree. They're going to be afraid and watching you go through these things. Right. Maybe like when you were going to India and stuff, people are like, why are you going? There had to be somebody in your life going, have you lost
people
your
super
mind?
Close to me, yes. right.
And so you got to look at them with kind of love and
compassion
and inspiration, right? And so that's kind of my takeaway from this conversation is like, even though I don't agree with a lot of politically things she says, I really do appreciate and love her kind of energy, her passion, her commitment, and her willingness that we have to have this kind of foundation, this base that we. Anytime we disagree with somebody, there's always more we agree on than we don't. Right. And that always gets lost in the noise.
And I think in that finding, and yes, for me, if somebody's disagreeing with me, it brings up, maybe anxiety or anger or embarrassment or, confusion or whatever. But ultimately, that's also pointing me to, if I'm truly listening and truly present, it's also pointing me to probably more perspective.
Right.
And actually, I can elevate my thinking, right? I can actually take my thinking to the next level, no pun intended, but I can take my thinking to the next level because now I'm taking in new information versus just saying, no. If I can sit with being uncomfortable, then I'm going to learn something, right?
Because growth is involved with that.
Growth is uncomfortable.
That's right. So. Well, take all that in, guys, as you listen to the Marianne Williamson conversation we have. It's a really entertaining one, and I'm so grateful she came on the show.
So grateful.
Go check out her stuff at. Look in the show notes for her Substack, which is a really cool feature. Have you ever heard of Substack?
I had not.
Yeah, a lot of people are doing it now where they're writing things, and so go check that out. And all the links are in the show notes here at the bottom of the page. And go to our website, nextlevelmethod.com, to learn more of all the things that we have, all the live events that we got coming up in the next year, and our brand new app that is now available on your favorite application store. And if you would, follow us on your favorite podcast application and write a review. It does wonders. We got to get the more notice in the sea of 3 million podcasts. Oh, my Lord. So write a review, follow us, and thank you for being a supporter at Next Level Method. All right, let's get on with this conversation with Marianne Williamson here on Next Level Method. Well, Marianne Williamson, man, it's so exciting to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I've been wanting to talk to you for a really long time. I've been a huge fan of you. Man, you've got so many things we could talk about. But I think when I got...
Thank you.
What really resonated with me was when you talked about, and I've quoted you many times in a keynote, about how, what we should be afraid of. We're not afraid of... usually afraid of that.
Our darkness, we're afraid of our light.
Yeah. I've heard that quote so many times, and I just realized it was you.
That's
I was
her.
like, this is amazing. This is really good. And
it's the words are me, but the basic idea, that was from my book, A Return to Love, which is my reflections on the principles of the Course.
Right.
So the larger idea is from the Course in Miracles.
Right.
And it's my words interpreting them that.
And you're very popular at my house, not for probably what you think, but you're popular because I have a 6-year-old, and I brought it in today so that you could see it. I hope you can see that.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
So,
now that little girl in the back of that book is now 31 years old.
Oh, my
God. Yes. So
your child is going to grow up.
Yeah, so when we were getting ready for the interview, I was like, hey, we read that book. I'm going to go get that book. That's an amazing book. So yes, thank you for writing that.
That makes me happy.
Yeah, he picks that out quite often.
Well, we reference love a lot, and I know when I talk about in my leadership practice, it goes back to love all the time. And I think sometimes it's amazing when I talk about love. I don't know if I ever told you the story, Matt, but one time I was doing a training and coaching session. It was about 2 months long, and it was with a group of aeronautical engineers at the FAA, all engineers. And I started talking about love in this deep, and boy, they recoiled. And they thought I was talking more about kind of the arrow side of love. And I was, no, it's more the agape style, where it's, I sacrifice so you may prosper, that kind of thing. Have you ever received that kind of recoiling when people talk about love? I've seen it a handful of times when I talk about it. I'm curious about kind of your experience with it.
Well, if you know anything about my presidential campaign.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
A big dose of mockery and derision. But
that's right.
When people really understand what you're saying, they don't recoil. And of course, there have been major figures in history, from Martin Luther King to Mahatma Gandhi, who talked about it and were received. They were men. I think that was a large part of the reason. But also when you're talking to people like aeronautical engineers, when you're talking to people who have to do with things like the FAA, one of the things that I've learned speaking to people who work in situations like that is that there is a high level of stress and anxiety that they're always on the edge of, because people's lives are often in their hands. If you're talking to aeronautical engineers at FAA, they're talking about the safety of millions of people.
Right.
This is very serious work that they're doing. So even though the word love might not necessarily be what gets brought up most productively, conversations about how to work with each other in community, with deep concern for one another is absolutely a conversation that people can relate to. My brother said something to me when I was running for president. He said, Marianne, I know a lot of guys who really support your issues and are really with you politically. He said, but men, the word love is a tough one. Can't you just come up with some other word? And I really understood what he was saying, because there was an automatic assumption that we're talking about the aero side of it or whatever. And so all of us, no matter what we do for a living, are yearning for an experience of brotherhood, really. Community, deep connection. And some words may or may not get in the way, and it's up to us as speakers to figure out the words that would be best for every situation.
It's the connection piece. I love that word connection, and you're probably right. And I'm just, as you were talking, I was replaying the tape in that conversation. I was unprepared for it. I was taken aback, and we finally get back on track. And I did use the word connection. I said because, and if I think back to the yearning or the kind of the gnawing that I'm always feeling, you and I've talked about this gnawing. I think it is that yearning for connection. I mean, if you look at all the craziness that we've all been experiencing, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years, I think it's this loss of connection. We've seemed to forgotten how to connect with each other. And
yes, I mean it's a natural ability, a muscle that we're born with. You see it in babies. You see it in how we hold babies, and then it's almost as though we are mentally trained to forget it. We are mentally trained to turn away from it. We are mentally trained that connection is not safe. We are mentally trained to think that we have to compete with people. So don't build too much connection because they might win and that would mean that you would lose. The truth of the matter is the only safety is in community and connection. The only safety is in our learning to go deeper. When you lose connection, you lose deeper conversation. And so many of the problems that we have in the world is because there's not deep conversation going on, whether it has to do with our children while they're growing up. Matt was talking about reading to his child. And also, even going back to when you were talking about aeronautical engineers, after 9/11 happened, one of the things that we learned, to our collective dismay, was that if only the FBI had talked to the CIA. Remember that
Right.
business
Yep.
about, I think it was Muhammad Atta's computer. There had been plane crashes. The O-rings when the
NASA,
Challenger
yeah.
exploded, and the big story that came out about how all these people had concerns about the O-rings, but they were afraid to mention it. The person who did mention the O-rings was mocked for doing so because it wasn't in line with the financial agenda. So our inability at this point, or our lack of practice, I don't know about inability, but lack of practice to develop within even the most sophisticated professional situations, capacity to go deeper into conversation with one another, is perilous.
Yeah.
It's damaging. It's damaging to us as people, and it's damaging to our businesses, and ultimately it's damaging to our society.
It's almost like we have to have an incentive where the culture can be, I mean, certainly as a minimum, you've got to have in our relationships and in our organizations the right to challenge. That should be the baseline minimum. But we have to somehow get to the place where we're almost incentivizing people. And when I say incentivizing, I don't just mean by money, but incentivizing and rewarding people to get to the point where it's an obligation to challenge, right? This freedom or this obligation to challenge is what seems to be lost. And that really produces, I think, the best ideas. It produces the best safety. It produces the most comfort. It produces the best results, the most I don't know, right? What do you think when you hear me say that?
Go ahead, Marianne.
Well, we're moving, obviously, from one paradigm to another in just about everything, and that includes the top-down model, hierarchical model of leadership, to one in which the leader is holding the space for the brilliance of the other. The real leader, particularly today, knows that he or she is going to win by mining the depth of brilliance, genius, and ideas in the people who are working on the team.
Right.
So a smart leader, not just a good leader, a smart leader knows the ability to learn from others. You know, in 1994, I met then President Bill Clinton, and he had a mannerism. I've never talked about this publicly, but he had a mannerism that was quite extraordinary to be in his presence. We were having a meeting, and his body language was amazing. And I had great respect for this, I have to say. So you're in a meeting with him, and you're talking about whatever he's asked you to talk about, and his body language is like this. He's listening to you, and when and he's very focused. And when he thinks you have something more to say to him, he says, "That was his body
Really?
language."
That's interesting.
Give me more. I want to hear more. He totally, and I was like, wow. And he brought out your one, because he'd say like this. He'd say, meaning, I like that idea. I want to hear more. Tell me more. Tell me more. And obviously, he was president. He had no time to suffer fools, nor did he. And another thing that he did that I thought was really brilliant in terms of leadership was he had an almost uncanny way of finding out very quickly, what do you know about that could be of use to me? What do you know about that could be of use to what I need to know? And obviously, he's the leader, right? He's president of the United States. And he found it very quickly. He had such an ability to know how that might fit into what his work was and what he needed to do. And then he sat there, and I remember how we went like that. I've never seen someone demonstrate such a level of, I want to hear what you have to say that might contribute to the larger issue at hand.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm just curious, what were you actually talking to him about back in '96?
Well, at that time, Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House at that time.
I remember that.
And Newt Gingrich, it's very interesting talking about leadership in business. A lot of Republicans come from the private sector, particularly business sectors. And so Newt Gingrich brought into the political sphere within the Republican Party many of the practices that were pretty cutting edge in business at that time. And for purposes that I agreed with President Clinton were quite nefarious. But I had made some comment in a letter, in a conversation with, I think it was Hillary, I'm not sure, that their psychological perspicacity is much greater than yours. They have a psychological astuteness to what they're trying to pull off that you guys are not demonstrating.
Right.
And they are looking to people who understand those things. You aren't. And tell me more.
That's very interesting. I've ran into a few people that have had interactions with Bill Clinton, both people who were supporters and both people who weren't supportive of him politically. And even interesting, the ones that weren't supportive of him politically, they had these one-on-one interactions with him, and they said they could not believe that he said that he had this, like you said, that was interesting, the body language, but they had this charismatic quality to make you feel like you're the most important person in the room.
Yeah, I was the ex-CEO of Cessna here in town. I was listening to him talk the other day, and he was talking about Bill Clinton and how he came to Wichita and how he was just really impressed by his charisma, his presence, his ability to literally talk to every single person in the room. Doesn't matter if they were the janitor or the president of Cessna Aircraft at the time. And I was like, that was just very interesting. And I don't think he necessarily was in alignment with him politically, but certainly really respected the man. So,
but I think that what I was talking about was, even though I agree with that about his charisma, his ability to make you feel important, because I think he really did have that within him. But I meant specifically the leadership qualities of finding out what that person, because that really is what we're talking about here, that the new leader, the modern leader, the contemporary leader knows that holding the space for the brilliance of everyone on the team is the key to forward movement for the leader, but also for the business, for the organization.
Yeah, finding it.
System.
Yeah, to make this isn't about me. I need to surround myself with the people that are going to give me those ideas,
who have something that I need to hear.
That's right. That's very interesting. That's good insight. I need to do that more.
Well, if you have, it's like the director in a movie. It is not necessarily more talented or smarter than the actors or the cinematographers, but somebody needs to call cut. Somebody needs
Someone has the accountability
have the
monkey.
job of putting it all together, but that doesn't mean that they are necessarily the most talented person on the set. If the actors aren't good, the movie's not going to be good. If the cinematography is not good, it's not going to be what it could be. So the director is the one, making the calls. But if they're a good director, it's pulling together in an almost symphonic way the talent and the abilities and the skills of everyone on the set.
Yeah, to me that is a loving act. I don't know, to me, because it
is a love, and yes, I would agree with you. And as you and I have said, it becomes problematical in some systems with some people, less, to use that word. But of course it is. It's that which binds us to one another. It's
the ability to take the accountability monkey and put it on your back and keep it there, and let everybody. It's almost like the window mirror theory. Like if this thing is a failure, I'm looking in the mirror, and if it's a success, I'm looking at the window out of all the people that helped me, right?
Wow.
I think that's kind of the way. To me, that's the essence of love. Yeah, I was reading your Substack today. Congratulations on launching Substack this year.
Thank you so much.
Really nice. And we're speaking about love. I was reading just about an hour before we started this conversation the Love in Action piece you wrote just a little bit. That was really good.
Thank you. That will be an event on November 5th and 6th, and people can find out more about it at loveinaction2021.com. And I appreciate it. It's going to be an amazing event, actually, with Deepak Chopra and Catherine Woodward Thomas and Ayanna Van Zandt and Michael Beckwith and a lot of great people.
How come we're not on the list?
We didn't get on this. And I know Michael Beckwith. He stayed at my guest house here in Wichita.
Oh, well, you need to, hopefully you will be receiving an invitation, but you can certainly see it on my Instagram and on my Marianne.com and loveinaction2021.com.
What are we hoping to accomplish with this?
Well, Richard, I think that right now a lot of people feel real despair.
Oh, for sure.
We are going through a very challenging time, and it is tempting to go into a kind of emotional nosedive. I think that we all grew up thinking that the pillars that held up this house of our democracy and of our ecosystem and of everything else that we depend upon, certainly had its weak spots, had its fragilities, had its vulnerabilities, but in the long run, we were the United States of America and we got all this handled. I think so much has happened in the last few years and is happening that is a shock to see some of the ways in which the center is not holding, the pillars are not standing firm. We have challenges that many of us thought we would never face in our lifetime, whether it has to do with challenges to our democracy, whether it has to do with healthcare system, the pandemic, whether it has to do with the environmental assaults and challenges of climate change. So many things are happening, any one of which we might have felt we can absorb it, the system can absorb it. But so many of these deep challenges are happening at the same time, so close to one another. It's a sense of all systems breakdown. I think that we are experiencing a simultaneous fall of Rome and emerging Renaissance. When people ask, which is it? It's both. Mm-hmm. And which way will it go? Wherever we put our energy, wherever we put our love. And I think many people today are almost paralyzed. But I believe that hope is a moral imperative. I believe that cynicism is just an excuse for not helping. Mm-hmm. But I do believe we can get through this. We've had very dark chapters in our history before, and we shouldn't forget that. But we will get through this if we rise to the occasion, as other generations have done. That's where I think the problem lies. That root level of paralysis, depression, anxiety, self-reference. I think people who have only been used to thinking of their problems in terms of how it affects me mm-hmm. are not centered in the kind of mentality we need now. There's a big us going on here. There's a big we going on here. This is not my climate crisis. This is our climate crisis. This is not my democracy. This is our democracy. This is not my pandemic. This is our pandemic. It's a real shift. And I think that right now we need death doulas and birth doulas. We have to tenderly allow to pass away what needs to pass away, and we need to very tenderly give birth to what needs to be given birth here. I hope that people will feel at the Love in Action event, and in all of my work, my Substack, etc., that's the deeper conversation. But Love in Action, my hope is that it's such a dose, it's such a vitamin B12 shot that you at the end of it feel like, I so am ready to participate in this major co-creative wave of love and change that is going to turn this country and this world around. That's my goal.
I like it.
So I've got a question that's been dancing around my head and soul since we booked this interview, and with you, and it's such an honor and pleasure to speak with you. How do we reconcile? So even some of the stuff you were mentioning, climate crisis, pandemic, and all these things that are affecting us currently. You come from a unity background. I come from an actual unity background. As far as that's where I go to church, and that's I'm on the board mm-hmm. of that. So how do you reconcile speaking into consciousness that which we want versus fighting against something? I'm kind of
good question.
Well, even love sometimes says no. Mm-hmm. You said you have a 6-year-old?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Little boy or little girl?
I have a 6-year-old boy and a 2-year-old girl, so I've got a couple of these little
now,
critters.
If either one of them walked into the kitchen with a sharp scissors, mm-hmm. what would you do?
Of course, yes. Yeah,
you'd have to take the scissors out of their hands.
Yeah.
You try to do it in the right way,
mm-hmm.
but you could not let them continue to play with the sharp scissors. They're too young. Mm-hmm. And even in unity, people in the New Thought movement are very aware of the importance of setting boundaries, mm-hmm. very aware that you shouldn't go back to an abusive lover. Mm-hmm. you shouldn't let people take advantage of you. There's nothing in unity which is stupid love. It's
Right.
not, oh, walk all over me. So why should we let an economic system that is based on short-term profit for huge multinational corporations that continue through fossil fuel extraction to behave in ways that, while they make money for their stockholders, are causing such serious peril for the planet itself that there's a real question about whether or not our grandchildren will be able to inhabit this planet. If we have said, please don't, if we have tried to use the mechanisms of a representative democracy to get that to stop, but if the undue influence of money on the part of those corporate forces is so great that what we want and what we need is overridden, at some point we say, this needs to stop now. Just like you would if somebody, God forbid, walked into your house and threatened your children. And this is what we were talking about just now, about the difference between threatening your children and threatening all of our children. There would be a point where you lock the door, and if necessary, you would call the police.
Of course.
So this idea that love is namby-pamby does not serve us. Love sometimes says no, and the divine feminine sometimes has a fierce aspect. And when she messes with her children, she has a very fierce aspect.
Right.
That's what she's expressing through the hurricanes, through the tornadoes, through the various huge storms and other natural disasters, that are nature saying there's a limit past which this cannot continue. Now, in the Course in Miracles, which I think of as a New Thought teaching, very aligned with
So of course,
thoughts
we
of
teach
unity.
it. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, there's a line that says, look at the crucifixion, but do not dwell on it. So the crucifixion is a metaphysical symbol for the destructive force of lovelessness. And if you don't look at it at all, you're not in transcendence, you're in denial. Transcendence is positive denial, where I don't deny you exist, but I deny your power over me. If you, as the father in your home, there's somebody lurking around the windows, peeping in, you're not going to ignore that and say, oh, it's all an illusion and it's so toxic. You're going to do what needs to be done. You are going to deny the power of that dysfunction and malfeasance and criminality to get anywhere near your family.
All that makes sense. The thing that I always go back to where, and I love everything you're saying in the sense of okay, we've got to stop. Just like in leadership thing, this isn't about me. This is about them. It's about us. But I think we've lost particularly this ability to sit down at the table, because I look at you, Marianne, and I'm making it a goal and a mission to talk to people who I may not align with politically or even some of the solutions. But we've lost the ability to sit down across from each other and have these kind of conversations in a loving way, right? Because it's... Go ahead.
I'm not sure individuals have been so much. I'm to the left
right.
of the political. Yeah, I know many very intelligent conservatives. President Eisenhower said the American mind at its best is both liberal and conservative.
That's right.
Of course.
I know quite a few people who we first of all, the idea that we don't agree on solutions. None of us should enter the conversation thinking we know what the solution is.
I agree with you.
Because the whole idea is I'm going to learn from you, you're going to learn from me. None of us have a monopoly on truth. That's the founder's vision, that the truth will rise to the top and it's always some mix. What has happened, however, is that because the media they get more clicks if we're fighting.
That's right.
They get more headlines if we're fighting. It's like when that television show Crossfire began. I'll tell you another story from Washington that I think is interesting. Many years ago, it was during the impeachment time. I was with Dennis Kucinich, and I was at the Capitol building in Washington. We were walking into an elevator, and Lindsey Graham came out. And so Dennis Kucinich, progressive Democrat, Lindsey Graham, conservative Republican. Lindsey Graham at that time was still a congressman, okay? We walked into the elevator. Hey, Dennis! Hey, Lindsey! They hugged. Hey, how you doing? And I walked into the elevator, and I was like, and Dennis was like, what are you so huffed up about? I said, Lindsey Graham, haven't you heard the things he says about on the impeachment trial? He said, oh, Marianne, that's just TV. He said, he's a great guy. We work on a lot of stuff together. He said, don't buy that crap. That's not what's true. And it was such a lesson for me. Mm-hmm. So there is a book called Hate Inc. by Matt Taibbi, mm-hmm. and he actually traces how much money there was to be made. He talks about how Roger Ailes at Fox News was the first one who came up with that idea, that the way the news could make money would be less about giving the news and more about stirring the pot and making people against each other. And it has obviously had a profoundly debilitating effect on our society, on our culture, and now on our politics. But I think that there are many of us.
I agree with you.
Who, that's not my personal experience, that you can't talk to.
That's very encouraging to hear, because I have no problem with this. I know you get it, we get it, and there's a lot of people who get it, but we don't see it. And I know that it exists. I want to know how to combat it, I guess, in the largest sense. I don't have an issue. I know that we can sit down at the table and break bread and hug and cry and debate and disagree, but still, again, break bread at the end of the day. And how do we get the whole world to do that, I guess, is what is always overwhelming.
You're doing it with the exact ways that we're doing it.
That's
we're
right.
all three of us. We're out there. We're doing our podcasts. We're writing our pieces, doing it exactly the way we're doing it. Werner Erhard said, you can live your life out of circumstances, or you can live your life out of a vision. We all know that those negative circumstances that you described exist. Mm-hmm. But I feel this way as someone who's worked with the public for decades, and also someone who's run for political office. The American people are ready.
Yeah.
The American people, there's a line in the Course in Miracles. People hear you on the level that you speak from. Speak to the nobility. If we had a political system that spoke to the nobility in people, spoke to the compassionate in people, spoke to the conscience in people, this is a country that has done great things. Right now, we have voices of hatred and bigotry and racism and some of the worst aspects of the American character that have been harnessed for political purposes. I'm not in any way minimizing the danger that this poses to our democracy, but we can also harness love for political purposes. We can harness the angels of our better nature for political purposes, and that's, I believe, the challenge of our generation. It has been done before. We had slavery, but then we also had abolition. We had the institutional suppression of women, but we also had the women's suffragette movement. We had institutionalized violence against blacks in the form of segregation. We also had the Civil Rights Movement, Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act. We've done it before. Let's not be the first generation to wimp out on doing what it takes to put this country back on track. But in all those cases, it did involve saying no, pushing back the forces that would defeat us.
Well, and in most of those cases, they were, I would say it was semi-peaceful, but what would be, now that you're mentioning all those movements, and it was a before and after, what, in your opinion, or what would be your idea, what is the before and what is your vision of the after? I mean, what's the, because I can't quite put my finger on it. I can't put, there's so much of it, right? There's so much in the Black Lives Matter and the political stuff and climate change and all of it. It's like, what are we trying to transcend here? What is that?
Okay. What has happened over the last 40 years in this country is that we have allowed market forces to override the principles of democracy. Because of the undue influence of money on our political system, we now have a government that operates not really of the people, by the people, and for the people. So much as of a few of the people, by a few of the people, for a few of the people, mainly of their major corporate donors, by their major corporate donors, and for their major corporate donors. We have what is now like a new aristocracy. The short-term profitability for stockholders at defense contractors over-influences our foreign policies, whether or not we go to war. Short-term profitability for stockholders of big oil companies, fossil fuel extraction companies, overrides sensible environmental policies. Whether it has to do with big agriculture, whether it has to do with big chemical companies, whether it has to do with big food companies, whether it has to do with any of these huge behemoth corporate systems that before 1980 were regulated they were regulated and unions were supported, so that there was this playing field which, if not always level, still gave the long-term safety and security of the American people a running chance. What started happening 40 years ago with this economic system that was promulgated called Trickle-Down Economics was a massive transfer of wealth, both through tax policies and deregulation, that has given what amounts to a very small group of people power in America, which is not democratic. You know, the late, great Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis said, you can have a large amount of money concentrated in the hands of just a few people, or you can have democracy. You cannot have both. Now, there are two main areas as examples here. We now have what's called a war economy. We have 51% of all jobs in the United States. This is millions of people whose jobs are basically dependent on the defense industry. Well, some people would say, yeah, well, look, they're creating all those jobs. But that it is also leading to very nefarious effects. The Afghanistan war, which turned out to be a spectacular failure, gave $2 trillion to defense contractors. The Iraq war, another failure, another big oops. Maybe that wasn't so smart. Another $2 trillion to defense contractors. Now, we know statistically that money that goes towards a peace economy, that goes towards education, that goes towards health care, that goes towards helping people have capital so they can have economic opportunities, actually gives us more of a return on investment. So we have to make a transition from a war economy to a peace economy. This is not something you can do overnight. It would probably be a 20-year process, 10 to 20-year process. And we have to make a similar transition from a dirty economy to a clean economy. People say about the oil companies, yeah, but look, there are millions of people who work for these companies. These are jobs. I understand that. But it's also destroying the earth. It's going to create an uninhabitable situation. So we must have a just economy. People, and also, of course, we need a strong military. But the military that we have, just yesterday, there was a new budget expenditure for the military that is $10 billion more than they are even asking for. We have about 2/3 of our military expenditure, our defense budget, goes to what the military leaders tell us they need. A third on top of that is not even what they say they need. It's what defense contracting industry wants, and both Democrats and Republicans fall in lockstep. So when you ask, what do we need? We need a just transition from a dirty economy to a clean economy, because people who work in these jobs, you know, you were talking about aeronautical engineers before, okay? If you're an engineer, you can make a lateral move. So an aeronautical engineer could be building a bomber, or could just as easily be working on something that has to do with peace-involved space exploration. So people who work in manufacturing, people who work in engineering, people who work in most of those jobs, and of course they should be taken care of by the society as we make these transitions. You know, how do we create these lateral moves? When it comes to race in America, because I come from a spiritual, religious perspective background, you must atone for your errors and make amends. And the more we in the United States have a deeper, I do not feel that the average American is a racist. That is not my experience. I don't think that. But I do think the average American is vastly undereducated, underinformed. And many of them for good reason. I mean, they grew up in white states. This has not been on their radar. But I think my experience of audiences that when people do have a deeper understanding of simply what the facts are, what they have been and what they are in terms of racial justice, then people are good. People want to make the appropriate amends and try to set things right, just like Germany did with the Jews after World War II. So I think that when you say, where do we want to go to, that's what we need. We need a political conduit for doing the right thing collectively, just like we try to do with our individual lives. And that, unfortunately, is what too often is missing among both Democrats and Republicans, because they're answering to their corporate donors more than to their constituents. If you look at things like Medicare for all, getting rid of the college loan debt, raising the minimum wage, a majority of Americans support those things. You have, for instance, we have a $780 billion defense budget every year now. The Build Back Better infrastructure bill would be over 10 years, $350 billion, but not one Republican would vote for it. And two Democratic senators, one who is funded very deeply by the coal industry, and another one who is funded very deeply by Big Pharma, will not vote for it. So you can see which of our elected officials are answering to the tune of that which is best for their constituency versus that which is in response to the corporate donors who fund their campaigns. It is a very corrupt government we have these days.
Well, and I guess that was going to be my next question / point is I just don't think we can rely on government to do any of this. I honestly don't. And I understand that they're kind of the heavy, the political, the cop, right. From my perspective, it's individuals' responsibility and us collectively to get together.
Do you think your recycling is going to answer to all our environmental needs? Well, do you think that if you just go gluten-free and drink green juice, that's going to keep your children safe from all the toxins in their food? These are huge structural systemic dangers that no one individual's behavior can transcend. If they're poisoning the food and they're poisoning the water and they're poisoning the air, what is the individual behavior that you think is going to be enough to override all that for you and for your children?
So from my perspective, it's like trying to fix something that's so broken it can't be fixed versus what's the vision of what can be in place of it. Like I heard you and Deepak Chopra talking about you potentially starting another political party. To me, that would be more of the answer than trying to fix the Democrats and the Republicans and the way their entrenched system.
I don't disagree with you about that. I wrote an article yesterday that was in Newsweek, and you can see it also. It's on my Transform podcast, called Washington, Adams, and Our Corrupt Duopoly. What you're saying now is something many Democrats and many Republicans are starting to say. The largest political demographic in the United States is independent.
I agree with that.
Now, Washington warned us against political parties in his farewell address. And Adams, the second president of the United States, also warned us against political parties. In our history, third parties have had a very important role. Abolition came from the Abolitionist Party, did not come from one of the two major parties at the time. Women's suffrage came from the Women's Party, not from either major political party at the time. Civil rights, Social Security, interestingly enough, who want to give up their Social Security, came from the Socialist Party. It did not come from the Democrats or the Republicans. So the idea of a third party it's a different conversation than only individuals can handle.
No, well, and I guess my point, my point was it's not, I don't want to spend.
That the whole duopoly is so
I don't want to spend my energy fighting the Democrats or fighting the Republicans or fighting the system. I want to say, how do we create a new system? Because not the new thought like religion, but the new thoughts and new ideas. There's so much out there now. I'm 50 years old, but I feel young and I feel excited about the future. But it's like I don't want to fix a broken system. Right. I want a new system, and I can get behind energetically. I could get behind somebody who wants to build something new, like Elon Musk. Agree or not agree with him? I don't know the man. I've never talked to the man, but he's exciting because he's doing stuff that's new and adventuresome versus fighting something. I guess
both parties are really good at telling us what they don't want.
Right.
Nobody's very good at telling us
what's the vision.
What the vision is.
Yeah.
And that's I think what is so disgusting about the politics is like all they're telling me Yeah, there's no exciting vision to wrap your arms around and get excited about.
Well, I don't know. I mean, when you think about something like in that human infrastructure bill, the fact that there would be a permanent child credit, the fact that there would be paid family leave, the fact that older people would get dental and eyeglasses and hearing aids. I'm 69 years old. If I didn't have glasses and if I didn't have hearing aids, I would not be able to participate in my own career. But I certainly agree with you about the corruption in both parties.
Well, that's the thing. There's a lot of good stuff in there, but there's a lot of bad stuff hidden underneath. There's a lot of sausage being made that no one can see and no one knows about. I think that's the problem.
Well, but do you want to give me an example?
Well, I think, if one thing, there's a lot of, they'll put a lot of the things about the voting, kind of the voting rules and changing the rules of the voting thing that didn't really have anything to do with it, with an infrastructure bill.
Do you think we should have voting rights legislation?
I think it should be separate from the Mohemuth bill, right? Yeah. I think you should separate those things and debate them on their merits or what they are.
Well, that's always, Washington's thing. Yeah. But it's interesting when you say the word system, because I'm a little bit of a traditionalist. I mean, I think the founders did give us an extraordinary system. It's called the Constitution.
Yes.
So I don't think we need, when some people say tear down the whole system, I'm like, wait a minute, guys, we have a Constitution. Well, the problem to me is not that we need a new system, it's that the system is being so corrupted by money and by party politics. So it's almost like we have to save what the system that we got from the founders from the corruption of the corporate duopoly, which I totally agree with.
Yeah, there are people
and I think
that want us to tear down. That's what I'm against, the people that want to tear the system down. I go back to, it's easy, because if you look at like someone like Frederick Douglass, for example, or anybody on these women's suffrage, gay rights, anything else, the ones that were successful, much like Frederick Douglass did, he held up the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and he says,
that's right, I agree.
He goes, well, explain to me how I don't fit into this. And that stops everybody in their tracks. Right.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly. Well, I agree with you entirely. And to me, the high-minded conservative, the high-minded liberal agrees on that.
Exactly.
But I don't think that the far fringes in either party agree with that, including Donald Trump. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He clearly does not.
I don't like fringe anything. I like this. Marianne, for 2024.
Yes,
I'm your campaign manager.
I think that's what it's going to take. It's going to take somebody to step out and do something like that, right? Whoever that is, and hopefully, I think people are waiting to rally around something like that. I really do, because to your point, I don't even like the name Independent Party. I think it needs to be people, persons, whatever that the common people, myself being a common person, can rally around and say, I agree. Even if I don't agree with everything that person says, I agree that they have a vision different than what I'm hearing from this platform or that platform, is kind of, I guess, what my original point was.
It's one of the things that both parties have done. I wrote about this in my book, Healing the Soul of America. When you, as I mentioned earlier about third-party voices, in our past, third-party voices have had a lot of power. Today, both Democrats and Republicans have formed a kind of unholy alliance on this topic.
Right.
And it's very difficult. In Europe, you have these parliamentary systems where, many different voices can be heard and empowered. And our founders did not create that. Although the founders also did not create, there's nothing in the Constitution about the political parties. It's the problem, and I know this having run for president, there's such a lot of money involved. So if someone were to run as an independent, if someone were to say, I don't want to have anything to do with any of those two political parties, then anybody who says, yes, I support you, would really start having to spend some cash, send some money, and raise some money, because it would be the only way to have even a voice,
a seat at the table, right? Because I noticed even during the
money
debates,
that they raise is in the billions.
Right.
No,
exactly.
we have a challenge in front of us, but I don't know that one thing I agree with Biden on, don't count out Americans. Churchill said, you can always depend on Americans to do the right thing after they have exhausted every other option. And I think, I don't know, you're talking about being unity. We're going to have a miracle here. Something's going to happen.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you.
People say to me all the time, how can you be as on it about they're doing this and big oil's doing that and defense contract and be so optimistic? Well, because of my background, that same background, which is you're not unsophisticated about the darkness, but neither are you unsophisticated about the power of the light.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And love is greater.
Yes, that's right.
There is no order of difficulty in miracles. Miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. We just need to operationalize love. A lot more people in this country and in this world, I believe, love than hate. But those who hate, hate with conviction. There's a line in the Course in Miracles that says conviction. It says miracles arise from conviction. Conviction is a force multiplier. When you were talking about Frederick Douglass, when you talk about the great people in our past, they had conviction.
Right.
You and I have to have conviction.
Yeah.
We need to see as much conviction displayed by those of us who love as by those of us who hate. Listen, freedom doesn't mean we all have to agree with each other.
Right.
We could sit down on different, you've mentioned it, Matt, you and I wouldn't agree on it. That's not where we disagree is part of the richness too.
It
Only
is.
in a totalitarian society does everybody have to see everything the same way. Nobody has a monopoly on truth. Let's understand that. The idea is about a higher truth rising to the top. But out of many, one. That is the first principle that is operative here. We are many groups, many viewpoints, many ethnicities, many cultures, but we are united by our fealty to a particular set of principles. And on those, we will not deviate. From those, we will not deviate. And that is the freedom of the individual, the responsibility of the government to balance individual freedom with concern for the common good. There are certain principles, whether it has to do with free speech, whether it has to do with freedom of religion, whether it has to do with freedom of assembly, that there are certain principles on which we agree to agree. From which we will not deviate. And then within that, we can go at it, have a conversation. I think it should be this, I think it should be that. We need to, we were talking about business before. I see the Declaration of Independence as America's mission statement. All men are created equal. All men are created equal, not just the rich, but also the poor. Not just the white, also the black. Not just the straight, also the gay. That is so profound. It was radical in 1776, and it's radical today. God gave all men, inalienable rights of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And John Adams said something so modern. Our second president said that he hoped that every July 4th, we Americans would take the opportunity to revisit first principles.
Yeah.
And that's like saying we're going to look at our mission statement. Read it. And that government's job is to secure those rights. And when government is not doing that, it is the right of the people to alter it or abolish it. We have a mission statement in this country. It's neither left nor right, but it is radical. And if more of us take that in, and another thing that I think is deeply concerning, not enough of our children even learn these things.
Yeah.
We have 10 states in the Union that don't even require a half a year of American history, civics, government. If our children don't learn what the Bill of Rights is, the first 10 amendments, all the protecting our freedoms. If our children don't learn that Bill of Rights, how do we expect them to become adults who are horrified when those rights are under assault? So I think we all have a lot of repair work to do with our own children in our own lives. As you were saying, Matt, talking across the aisle, talking to our friends who don't necessarily agree with us, but who share those common values, and turn this ship around. And I think we're going to. I believe it with all my heart.
This is why we love you.
Yes.
Everything you just said right there.
Yes.
Everything you said. It's just, that could have been coming out of Mark Levin's mouth almost, what you're saying right there, right? Someone that's so...
Tell me who...
Mark Levin?
Yeah.
Oh, he's
right. I do know who he is.
Hard right, Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's a conservative Republican. But again, I agree with you 100%, right? That's what binds us together, what you just said beautifully. And I love it. And if you do run for president, you need to have a podcast and I'll produce it for you. So just
Yes.
don't forget about me when you run again.
Thank you, but I heard from both of you that if I do, it needs to be not Democrat or Republican.
I would tell you, I'll tell you from my gut. You said the statistic that, and I don't even, like I said, I think independent's neutral enough because it's not been prominent enough in my lifetime to matter one way or another. So independent's probably okay, but I just think it's got to be something different. I think most people are tired of the party system where it's Democrat and Republican. And it's
not working.
It's not working.
But and to your point, it's going to take some horsepower. But I think there's even people who knows?
Yeah, but I agree
that
with
have
you,
enough money now that it might.
Is it better served to try to change both parties from within? I don't know.
Well, biblically, you don't pour new wine into old wineskins. I think these wineskins are kind of stretched and worn out and past their time. So from my perspective, let's get some new bottles in here. Let's get some new wineskin in here, and let's make some new wine. Because the old stuff's just not working. And I've got friends. We live in Kansas. It's traditionally a Republican state. And I'll tell you, I've got lots of friends who would declare themselves Republican for the sake of an election, who are more moderate than maybe even some liberal friends I know. I mean,
the whole idea of class. I mean, I sit there. I think I'm a classical liberal. I mean, the classical liberal sense in the Eisenhower era, right? I think we should take care of those that can't be taken care of.
Yeah, I agree, 110%.
But I'm obviously fiscally conservative. But
right.
But that has been lost. You can't even say classical liberal without getting labeled one way or the other. Right.
So no, I think it's going to take a new system. Not a new system. I apologize. I mean a new something different than Republican and Democrat. I guess I'll just say it that way.
All right. Well, I hope you'll read that article.
Yes,
definitely.
Yeah.
Well,
Washington, Adams, and the corrupt duopoly.
Adams is my favorite president. I love him.
Good. Well, read the article. You'll see his quote.
I will. We have violated your time crunch, and so forgive us for going way over what you said earlier.
Well, my office will be upset with me, but you know me, once you get me started talking about some of that stuff, I don't shut up, so it wasn't your fault, it was mine.
I love your spirit. I love your energy. I love your drive to change things. It's amazing.
Such a fun conversation.
Yes.
We're both huge fans. Anything we can do to support you,
yes.
You've got some diehard fans here in Kansas.
Thank you.
Never forget that. And how can people connect with you, learn more about Substack, Marianne.com? How can people connect with you?
Thank you. Marianne Williamson .substack.com. And you can also be on my mailing list at marianne.com. And the Love in Action seminar will be loveinaction2021.com. And then I'm on Twitter and Instagram and all of that.
Yeah, we'll have links to that in all the show notes. Please go check out our Substack. I really love Substack. In fact, I created my Substack for myself yesterday, and I think you got some really great stuff in there. Yeah,
we meditate in the morning and talk politics at night.
It's awesome.
Combination.
Thanks so much, Marianne.
Yes,
what a true privilege to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. God bless you guys.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Next Level Method podcast. If you found some value in this, tell somebody about the show. Tell your friends, tell your spouse, tell your kids, let them know all about Next Level Method. And go to nextlevelmethod.com to learn more and join our community. Thanks for tuning in.